consumption and production. We strongly believe that young people represent an invaluable resource from governments to accelerate the transition toward a greener and sustainable world. Environment and sustainability are key priorities for the U20 this year. Among the points that are emerging from our work, there is definitely the theme of education. In particular, we believe that the transition from a linear to a circular economy can only start from a cultural shift, where a new and modern education system can really play a double role. Firstly, both formal and informal education are important components to build awareness about environmental threats at the present and the future. Moreover, this is where we should start in order to build a society based on more sustainable lifestyles and use products and natural resources like water more carefully. Secondly, education is the key to train people that are able to promote and implement sustainable green economy models, and at the same time able to perform research and develop sustainable innovation that is fundamental for our future. We are very honored today to start this exciting day with two outstanding speakers, the Italian Minister of Ecological Transition, Roberto Cingolani, and the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Inger Andersen. Thank you both very much for being here with us today, and we look forward to hearing your inputs on such important topics. To start, I would like to ask a question to Minister Cingolani. Minister Cingolani, you recently mentioned that there cannot be an ecological transition without a cultural transition. What role environment ministers can play to promote such a transition and to enhance both environmental education and sustainable consumption models? Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Minister, we cannot hear you. I believe the microphone is switched off. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I have a double switch for the microphone. I have to go there and back. I'm sorry. It's a very big room. I said, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Well, the question is quite complex. Let me tell you what is my feeling right now after having worked to the recovery plan for a few months. We've been developing a global level, a growth system that was at the expense of the planet. I mean, sapiens appeared 130,000 years ago, and for about for most of the time, it was not impacting on the planet. We had less than 1 billion humans on the planet. We have a constant carbon dioxide production in a very neutral equilibrium with the planet. Over the last 200 years, after the discovery of the internal combustion engine, in a couple of centuries, we increased the number of sapiens by a factor of 10. So the demand of energy and the number of human activities was increasing exponentially just in 200 years. And the production of carbon dioxide was increased by a factor of almost 3. So if you consider since the appearance of sapiens, one day, 24 hours, everything happened in the last minute. So it's a very recent exponential growth of the problem. So the sense of urgency became very clear. So, you know, by the Paris Agreement, we have to mitigate the rise in the temperature. And the first issue now is to change the culture. The growth model cannot be any longer a growth model at the expense of the planet. It should be a growth model in favor of the planet. This means changing everything, changing how we move, how we produce, changing manufacturing, changing how we pack our food, how we eat, and also reducing inequalities. It is a very difficult, it's a very difficult transition, the one we have to perform. We don't have so much time. First, we need a paramount change in the technologies and in the organization of our economical and social model. So as I said, this is not only issue connected to increasing renewable energies, improving waste cycle, recovering the environment is not only this, it's also changing the way we interpret our social behaviors and changing the way we behave. This can only be done by a public and private collaboration. There's no way to have the public working and the private being independent of the public and vice versa. The private is creating most of the jobs, so we have to change the job market. Schools have to invest on children explaining what's going on. And last but not last, I think we need a lot of culture, because ideology, any ideological approach to the economical transition is going to be a big enemy of the future generations. I'm a scientist in background. I mean, I've been a scientist all my life, but for the last 4 months as a minister. And I have to say that I'm terrified in listening at incredibly wrong arguments that are raised by associations and group of people that in the name of the ecological transition, they claim things that are simply impossible. I mean, sustainability is one of the most difficult compromises we have to find in human history. There are different instances. One is the environment. The other one is the social sustainability. We have to find a trade-off. This is nothing easy. It's very expensive. It requires a lot of study, innovation, research and development, social awareness, common effort, and reduction of inequality. No ideology. There is no time for ideology. There's only time for creating a culture, investing, and working hard.
Thank you very much, Minister Cingolani, for your important inputs and remarks. Now I have the pleasure of giving the floor to Executive Director of UNEP, Inge Andersen. Executive Director Andersen, considering your long-standing commitment towards sustainable development, which policy tools do you think that governments can and should leverage to foster both an environmental mindset and competencies among youth to promote and accelerate a just transition toward a green and circular economy? Executive Director, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and let me thank you for organizing this youth summit, and let me obviously thank the Minister for his very thoughtful comment, and it's a pleasure to see you, Minister, and thank you for the leadership at the Italian leadership at G20. It's really important. Because like you say, this is a moment, it's 1 minute to midnight, as you rightly point out. And Alberto, what you say is, how are we going to get young people, not just inside the environment bubble, I'm sorry, because there are many people outside that environment bubble, to actually grasp these issues and take them with them as they take over all the controls of society, as Minister and I will go into retirement, right? That's the question. How can we make sure that you're equipped to be, yes, activists, but also actors of change? How are we going to make that happen? And it starts, as you rightly say, at the education level. And here we have some issues to be concerned about, because we have not started at the kindergarten level with proper environmental awareness and education at the global level. And this is something we know. Now, UNESCO has come out with work that speaks to, 50 countries that they've studied made no reference to environmental science in the national curricula. So we have a situation where maybe it's an information haves and the information have-nots, and it's inversely imbalanced by the climate impacted and the climate resilience, because it's a question of wealth and information. And so we really need to think about the information system, which is why education ministers at primary, secondary, and higher matters. And then the kind of information that we teach, right? Because it can't just be environmental sciences. This has to be inside the economic thinking, inside the engineering thinking, inside policy thinking, construction, etc. Because we know that the cities we are going to construct have to be different. We understand that we need to integrate green in everything. We have to understand the economic costs that we are incurring on society by having dirty air, by not dealing with climate change. That is an economic dimension. So it is not just about environmental education, it is about infusing environmental understanding into the rest of the system. And then, of course, using all the gear levers that we have in society to make that change. And here, I'd say, you know, as young people, and I'm one of these lifers, like I think Minister, we've been on the battleground forever. But the thing is, what I am seeing and what gives me hope is that there are people like yourselves who are stepping in, stepping up, and not waiting to be given the microphone. You are grabbing the microphone. Hold on to that microphone. Don't let it go. But also don't just be the activist. It's good to be activist, but take political power. The Secretary General often says, power is not given, it is taken. You take it, and you take it inside the voting booths with you, because as Minister said, these are complex things to balance, right? To make that sustainability work. It's easy to make the claims, but how do you make it work? So get inside the business of governing, whether it's at local level, in your communities, in organizations, get inside influencing. That's kind of where we need to get to, and you guys are the ones leading us there.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Executive Director, for these inputs and for the role that young people should take in this debate. Now I'm very happy to give the floor to my colleague from U20, Jacopo Pasquero, who will lead the discussion from now on. And Jacopo is part of the U20 and is the U20 chair for the sustainability track. Jacopo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberta. Thank you, Inger and Minister Cingolani, for your first reactions. I think we already touched upon some very important elements that can give us a better understanding of the role of education in the ecological transition. We're here today especially to hear the voices of the youth. And this is why I will now give the floor to the two delegates of the Climate, Sustainability and Energy track of this year's Youth 20 Summit, the Italian delegate, Nicola Blasetti, and the Canadian delegate, Jamila Bahai. Nicola, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jacopo. I'm a young Italian citizen who's been committed for years to finding a dream job. And ever since leaving my high school, a small liceo scientifico on the hills of the Marche region, I've tailored my skill set and gathered professional experiences in order to one day work a full-time role that would align my passions and my drive in fighting climate change. Since high school, I wanted to study environmental policy and sustainable development in an international context. So I managed to find an undergraduate bachelor degree that allowed me to focus on these green and climate-related areas of interest right at the beginning of my university experience. And these courses allowed me to gain valuable skills on climate law, energy policy, and many other topics. And I would thus recommend the G20 ministries to give young people the opportunity to study sustainable development, environmental science, climate science, and policy from the very first year of university, to start building a green job skill set. Whether you want to pursue it as your main subject or whether it is integrated within another course, everyone would benefit from it. Political scientists need to know about the threat of climate change and biodiversity loss. Mathematicians need to learn that their skills can be applied to climate modeling. These will be the green leaders of tomorrow. And while at university, I also learned how vital it is to experience the real world outside of your university classroom, to shape your understanding of climate change and all the other environmental challenges, and to put into practice what you have learned. Therefore, I believe it is important to restructure teaching schedules and university timetables to provide young people with the opportunity to undertake internships or work experiences during the break periods from university. When at university, we should not just learn notions and theories, but it is vital to integrate work experiences and soft skills in the curricula. Furthermore, not everyone can afford a non-paid internship. So let's work together to financially support those students that want to take a first step in the green jobs market by giving them scholarship opportunities. Finally, I'd like to stress the importance of supporting the development of a green jobs market. From my experience, it is a newborn jobs market that thrives on networking between more experienced professionals and young people, and that rewards being proactive when looking for opportunities. These initiatives could be a first step into equipping young people with the necessary competencies and soft skills, turning green jobs into normal jobs. I would love to hear your views on these proposals, and please let me ask you a question. Minister Cingolani, given your academic background, and Executive Director Anderson, given your international expertise, how do you think the education system should evolve? Is it a problem related to curricula or how subjects are taught? And what are the skills that young people should learn to be successful for the so-called green jobs? Thank you.
Inger, I give you the floor, please. Come on. We can't hear you.
Here we go. Now it should work.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roberto. So look, first of all, just to say that bravo to you. You clearly found a passion early on in your life, and you just went for it. And you just were not worried about what would come. You just went for it. And that shows the commitment. And I will say, I see that more and more in young people. The opportunities to then make your way into places, they always come in sort of circular and odd ways where openings arrive at your door when you least expect it. I think that may have been what you have experienced so far, and certainly what I've experienced myself. But what I think we need to, and it sort of goes back to what I said before, when we understand that, you know, there was a Erasmus survey that was done in 36 countries of teachers, and they found that 70% of the teachers felt that the curriculum did not sufficiently address climate in the education. Now, this is today, right? And so I'm old enough that I was at COP2. So, and now we are COP26, and we skipped a year, which means 27 years. So if in 27 years we've not managed to mainstream climate into education in 36 European countries, friends, we have a problem. And so it does mean cabinet level leadership at the prime ministerial level, because, you know, that's not just an environment problem, it is an education problem, it is a societal problem. So demand it, I think, and frankly, vote for it. You have a vote. And it's not necessarily a left or right issue, but it is an intergenerational justice issue. And it is an issue that belongs in the ballot box when you go in and vote. So hold your politicians to account. How will they enable that environmental stewardship will be integrated into education? I think it's a very fair point. Many countries have educational sort of, they're not trade unions, but they're organizations of young people that have organized themselves to negotiate, certainly in my country, Denmark, that's how it works, to negotiate with the Minister of Environment on things they want to see in their curriculum. Speak up, demand, because that is how the world changes. Now, at the same time, in terms of green jobs, there's sort of a number of buckets of type of jobs, right? There are the ones where you enter into big corporate and you want to be the change agent within that agency. Don't dismiss it out of hand. Don't. Enter into big corporate and be the change. Number one. Number two, be the startups. You know, enter into the startups, the green startups, find angel financiers, use the digital economy as you can, but create the jobs themselves, right? And then there are, of course, the established environmental path, which could be either in a philanthropic or an intergovernmental or whatever setting, which are also very valuable. That's where both Minister and myself finds ourselves. But these other two, where you change from within or where you are the change, actually matter greatly. Now, government, and there's Minister, and he was speaking now, sets the guardrails for how these shifts can happen, the policy guardrails for shifting through incentives, through taxation, etc., the behavior of financing, the behavior of the finance sector, the behavior of industry. But it's by making the politician make those shifts, it's by the ballot box that you will also force it. Let me stop here and hand it over to you, Roberto.
Thank you, Inger. So guys, let me let me tell you how I do see the future for you. I have 3 children, okay, 27, 23, and 12. I've been following their growth at school, at university. Now the 2 big are working already. One is a chemical engineer, the other one is a chemist. The third one is still at school, so he has time. They have been studying in Sweden, in Italy. The other one is moving to Japan. I myself was changing my place of work 23 times in my life, and I was living in 3 different continents. Why I'm telling you this? First thing, I would strongly recommend you guys see the diversities, see the differences. There is no teacher in the world that can give you more information about the world, like yourself traveling and comparing your mind with the mind of your friends around the world. This is for me the most fundamental action or investment you have to make in your life. Travel, see the difference, absorb the difference, and compare. The educational system, that is the state where you live, should provide you a quantitative mind. I'm sorry, the challenge of the ecological transition is nothing but quantitative mind. As Ingrid told you before, you have 2 different things, and you have to find the compromise. And if you want to find the compromise, you have to know the numbers. Otherwise, the risk is too big, becoming ideological or simply becoming too superficial. You have to assess the situation in a very quantitative way. Cross-disciplinarity is very important. As Ingrid said, I want to make another example. In the future, you will have robots operating with artificial intelligence in the human body, or you will have autonomous cars driving without pilot. Now, imagine somebody has to make the regulations for the autonomous surgeries or the autonomous car. Now, this regulator should be a computer engineer, or should be a lawyer, or maybe it should be both, or should be a computer engineer, or should be a medical doctor. Maybe it should be both. Who's going to give you both? I mean, of course, there will be no university, no school providing you all the knowledge, but for sure they should provide you the elements to know a little bit of everything. And then, of course, you will drill down and deepen your knowledge. The educational system should help you, but not only the educational system, even the news, even the TV, even the public information should give you the way to think, so to distinguish fake from reasonable. Get your own opinion. Don't follow the wave of the social. If 1 million people will put a like in the social saying that 2 + 2 = 5, keep your autonomy and insist that 2 + 2 is 4. There is no number of likes that can change quantum mechanics, chemistry, physics. So this is very important. In the meantime, don't forget humanities. Humanities are teaching you how to think, philosophy in particular. That is a big revolution, even in the educational system of most countries throughout Europe, to be honest, and maybe throughout the world. Of course, technical things like chemistry, physics, engineering will be important, because somebody has to transfer decisions into technologies, into operational models. But all this requires a new generation having a prepared mind and capable to catch the opportunity. That's all. There is no simple recipe, unfortunately. Just like we don't have the recipe for the sustainability. You have to go around and demand to understand everything, so that you will be able in the future to make your decision based on a real reasoning pipeline that sometimes today is missing. That's why I was so against the ideological approach to the environment. We still don't know the jobs of the future. I hope you are aware of that. We know that in 30 years, 70% of the people will have a job that today we still don't know. So it's hard to say what will be the educational system. The educational system should make you ready to catch the opportunity, as I said. I know it sounds a little bit philosophical, But unfortunately, there is no book to study now to know how to reprogram the future, because this is what we are doing, reprogramming the future. And there is no book to do that. We can only learn from the previous mistakes. So we need some independent judgment. That's all.
Thank you so much. And I think we already mentioned some very important elements: diversity, multidisciplinary approach, a rational mindset. I think these are all crucial elements in the ecological transition. But we're now going on, and I will now pass the floor to Jamila Bahai, the Canadian delegate. Jamila, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jacopo. We are well aware that the climate crisis is among the world's most dire, tenacious problems, which requires unrelenting attention now. We know that the next decade is critical to reaching the goals set out in the Paris Climate Agreement to mitigate effects of the looming crisis. We know that the current structure of the global economy and global finance systems must be altered significantly in order to make space for a sustainable future. Both you and I already know this. What we don't know is how will we achieve this? The answer lies in education, whose function is to provide youth adequate knowledge of the world around them, as well as the tools, skills, and perspectives needed to address the world's most pressing challenges. With youth being the most important stakeholders in the climate crisis, as tomorrow's generation of global citizens tasked with addressing the challenge of mitigating climate change, they must be prepared to handle the challenges ahead. This can be achieved through higher education reform. We know the dire importance of greening our financial structures to achieve a green economy transition. However, our business schools, training our future CEOs, business leaders, and bankers, offer curriculums that fail to train learners with this critical knowledge. Sustainability courses are offered few and far between, often as non-mandatory to curriculums. Green financing mechanisms and sustainability knowledge must be built into university curriculums to encourage and normalize sustainable practice in global business and finance sectors. Moreover, a green economy transition requires the rethinking of our classical notions of economics. Economic pedagogy must be transformed to provide insight and training on circular and sustainable models of the economy. As Minister Cingolani mentioned earlier, rethinking economic growth models to favor environmental sustainability. For example, a university in Lugano, Switzerland offers instruction on transformative economics, encouraging the study of economics to incorporate environmental and social welfare principles. It is for these reasons that I call on the G20 to take the lead in sponsoring the transformation of university and post-secondary education curricula to prepare youth for a true green economy transition. Sustainability and climate education must be woven into formal education to, as UN Sustainable Development Goal 4.7 states, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. The reality is that the climate crisis is a sticky, complicated one. Luckily, the solution to it is simple. Reform education curriculums to empower the world's most important allies in addressing the climate crisis, the youth. Minister Cingolani and Executive Director Anderson, I am keen to hear your thoughts on these ideas. And in addition, I'd like to pose to you this question. In your opinions, what is the role that younger generations could and should play in order to facilitate this ecological transition?
No. Women first, please.
Oh dear. Well, you know, I'm used to giving the minister the floor before me. So anyway, but it's a pleasure, Roberto. So thank you, and thank you very much for your comments, Jamila. Look, unfortunately, I'll push gently but friendly and with love in my heart a little back on you, because I don't think the solution alone is in education. The solution, education is part of the solution, but that is not all of it. We have known, look, it was in 1988 that the IPCC was established. 1988. That's before the Rio conference, right? Some of us were vehemently opposed to, back in COP, early single-digit COPs, any policy on adaptation, because why would we adapt when we know perfectly well that the answer lies in mitigation? So there should be no need for adaptation. Now, today I'm on the barricades fighting for adaptation funding, don't get me wrong, because we didn't adapt. So the point is, knowledge is not enough. It takes more than knowledge. And the truth is, the world, if it has been bothered, would know what we know today, but we just know it with ever finer, due to scientists like Roberto, ever finer millimeters of understanding. What we have known since 1988, that climate change was real and that the science told us the significant impact. We are beginning to understand that even 1.5 degrees will have catastrophic impacts. So we just know it with ever greater clarity. So you describe these systems that have to change. And I go back to the fact that, yes, it's a financial system. Yes, it's a food systems. Yes, it's the cities that have a very heavy weight. It's the way we produce and consume. It's lack of circularity. But who's going to make that change? It is us. And it is us in the decision-making places where we sit. And I really I speak to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The world is big, right? The world is diverse. And I really like what the minister just said, that, you know, by understanding and broadening your horizons, you get an understanding of how other people live, and the reality is elsewhere. And so what may seem like a neat fix becomes a fix for the rich. And what maybe it's sort of, you know, the vaccine, but written at very large. I sit in a country where less than 1% is vaccinated, and Delta variant is rolling over us with deep worrying impacts. And that is just a little overture to what climate change would be for this country and for this continent on which I have the privilege of being right now. So understanding, therefore, that the wealthy countries, and let's face it, the G20 countries, which are responsible for around 80% of all emissions, have a special role and a special leadership to play. And so you, as citizens of these countries, have a special obligation and a special duty, because that shift, that gear shift, will enable the Guinea-Bissaus and the Gambias and the Kenyas and the other smaller economies to survive in a manner that is at least survivable. So I think it is about political mobilization. It is about government setting the guardrails. It is very much about understanding the science. We at UNEP, we are a science-based organization. We put the data out there, and then, you know, others will say that 2 + 2 is 5. We put the data out there again. We've been hosting IPCC together with our friends in WMO since the beginning of time. And it is hard to see how that data is consistently ignored and misrepresented and diluted by powerful interests. So be aware of what those interests are, but also don't be naive, because we have to balance the life and the poverty reduction and all the achievements. Nearly 1 billion people go to bed hungry every night, and food waste is the 4th biggest emitter of CO2. So how are we going to figure out justice, intergenerational as well as international justice and equity? That's where the G20 has a special opportunity. And that's why I'm so pleased that Italy is leading the G20 right now, because it's putting on the agenda at the time when governments have put $14 trillion into the economy to stimulate the economy. There can be a voice in a conversation about what this money is going to be used for. Yes, and this will be my last point. The earliest payouts were to money in people's pockets, medicine, health, etc. But now we're beginning to see money going into infrastructure, economic activity, etc. Demand at the ballot box that money does not go back to the bad old days, but shifts a groove. After all, that money is going to be repaid by you. This money is debt, and you will be the repayers. So we cannot leave you both a mountain of debt and a broken planet. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Inger. Honestly, guys, I think you should take the tape of what Inger told you so far and listen at it at least 3-4 times in a row, because she said really the most important fundamental things. I really agree 100% what you said, Inger. That was very illuminating. Let me add just a few things, because you said most of the stuff, and I fully agree. I consider education not to be the solution. Of course, it cannot be the only solution, but I consider education like an important ingredient in your culture to create, to approach justice. I mean, remember that the ecological transition is not only chemistry of the atmosphere, chemistry of the land, it's also reducing inequality in a planet that consists of 8 billion people, and 3 of those 8 billion people, 3 billion people, they are still cooking in their house, burning plastic wood. They don't have a clean cooking in their house. So we know right now that there are millions of deaths every year simply because there is in-house pollution. Paradoxically, this is even worse than the external pollution that we create in our countries with our cars, aircrafts, digital machinery, and so on. So you need to be educated. You need to know the numbers. You need to understand why inequality impacts on the transition so much. It's too easy to say to the vulnerable countries, I'm sorry, stop growing because I produced your carbon dioxide in the past when I was growing. So now you cannot grow any longer because I made all the damage. Now you just have to breathe my air, but you cannot grow. I mean, you understand, this is a sort of colonialism. It doesn't work like this. So the transition also needs balancing processes to allow growing countries to grow better than the way we grew. I mean, all those things need knowledge. Knowledge creates justice, it creates better economy, it creates better organizations. If you have a good organization, you develop a good governance, and possibly you have a safer world and also a more sustainable world. Don't forget that we're going to be 8 billion for at least another century. Thermodynamics is not politics. The planet has been designed to support not more than 3 billion humans. And this is called the biocapacity. Every human needs at least 2.7 hectares of land, statistically, to survive. At the moment, we have 1.6, despite we have intensive agriculture, intensive production, so on and so forth. That means that every July, you start using the resources that your planet was supposed to produce for you the following year. Guys, you need knowledge for that, not only education. Knowledge means think about those things, correlate phenomena that are apparently uncorrelated, but they are. An important point that you have to pretend for the future is gender equality. Guys, gender equality is one of the things that at the moment is totally underevaluated, underestimated, but it's one of the most important things. Just society, sustainable society needs gender equality. This is biology, it's not education. We are against biology when we don't boost gender equality. Finally, don't strike, don't go screaming on the road. That's good one day only. Change the system from inside. And you can change the system from inside if you know what you're doing, if you know how to think, how to evaluate, how to discriminate. Revolutions should be done by, as I said before, well-prepared mind. At this moment, with the challenge of the ecological transition, we need people that are calm, aware, and positive. To my opinion, in 5, 6, 7 years, we should stop talking about transition because the transition cannot last forever. We accelerate during the transition in this decade, let's say, and then it should be just a sustainable society. And you should be the actors of the sustainable society if we will be able to change the system from inside, having the right arguments, the right knowledge, and also the right approach. And so I wish you the very best, as I do with my children.
Thank you very much. And with this, we're concluding the high-level segment. We touched upon some key elements that highlighted how education can really be an asset when it comes to engineering a sustainable and just future. One thing was clear there is no sustainability without youth. We also mentioned that various components of education, stressing the complementary role that formal education, non-formal education, and capacity building have. We're now getting deeper in unpacking all these components, and this is why that without any further ado, I will now give the floor to Ulysses Brangi, who will host the next session on formal education. Ulysses,
Bye,
you
everybody.
have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacopo, and welcome everyone to this session on formal education. My name is Ulises Brengi, and I'm going to be your host. A quick background on myself: I'm based in Argentina, and I'm part of ADOS Global, an organization that develops innovative solutions in the field of education by equipping people with the soft and digital skills needed to thrive in this ever-changing world. And I focus mostly on future of work and school to work transition initiatives, and currently co-leading a capacity building program for clean energy startups. Today, we're going to be talking about the role of higher education in this transition and how, unfortunately, they're not meeting the expectations set by the COPs conference, as Inger mentioned previously. We're going to be talking about the role of students and youth in general, and what do we demand from universities, and which is the key role that universities are playing in this transition and meeting these students' expectations. We're having three amazing panelists. I will ask them to keep it under the 4 to 5 minutes during your presentations. And if you want to share any recommendations based on your expertise, and how can the G20 governance structure and countries support and promote different type of policies and initiatives, I will ask to join first Anna, an international relations student and board member of the Climate Students Movement. Anna, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning from Brazil. My name is Anna. I've just recently graduated on international relations, and I've been working with climate change for 4 years now on volunteer work. And well, you all know we have to do more than go net zero on campuses. We need to stop educating people with a high carbon emissions mindset. Students with the sustainability mindset, given the proper research and innovation incentives, will translate into citizens ready to deal with climate change. And that will for sure be in alignment with the financial flows, which is the center of the G20 agenda. So how do we do that? First of all, it's something related to what the executive director Inger Lacour mentioned. We need to decolonize education. We need to decolonize engineering, medicine, architecture, and the whole structure that brought us here. That suffocates nature and oppresses the traditional communities and traditional knowledge, as is not happening here in Brazil. Second of all, talking about curricular change, we need to define learning objectives and learning outcomes we want to deliver from this curricular change. We need to ask students, through surveys and polls, the skills, the knowledge they want to gain from the course. For instance, the effects of climate change in my local community, skills they want to develop, organization skills, mobilizing, campaigning skills, and attributes they want to have after they finish the course, as entrepreneurial and research skills. For that, it's important for us to include students in curricular committees to know what they want to know. At the higher education level, it's not enough to teach basics about the climate change, the climate emergency. We need to adapt the curriculum to each course to apply that systemic view of the challenge daily on their future jobs. And if you have clear results of how achieving those learning outcomes will help students to get a better job or to generate positive social impact after they graduate, they will have a different interest, a different look at it. Universities, I know the universities care about what students do after they leave it impacts their reputation. So that's an important topic. Third of all, you can gather evidence. Surveys with students can help understand what knowledge they want to gain, but also polls with companies to understand what skills they are demanding for the future employees. To almost be ending, you need to associate the values of your university, of the institution, with the climate crisis. For example, my university is a Catholic university, and the current Pope raises the debate of taking care of our common home, and religion and ethics are mandatory subjects in my college. So those clearly relate to climate change, and I will use that as an argument to approach my college, my faculty members and deans, for instance, to say that their action needs to be aligned with their values that they are preaching. Also, I think extracurricular activities need to be a must, because students need to apply the knowledge they got so they can gain practical experience and give something back to society at the same time. At last, use external partnerships. UN has an SDG Academy, and you don't have to start from scratch. There is a lot of organizations and science-based initiatives that can help you, can help departments and faculty members and teachers to develop this curriculum. We need to rebuild our concept of power. And I want to ask you all today, what are you using your power for? 2030 starts now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I will keep that one of your first phrases of how do we have to change our current mindset of how do we teach climate and science. Based on that, on how to teach climate, I will ask to join Joseph Ball, who's an ecologist and conservation scientist, and will bring the perspective from both his experience in the University of Kent and Oxford University. Joseph, all yours.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Anna. You're a tough act to follow. So as introduced, I'm an ecologist and physicist, and I've spent much of my entire working life since being at university working in the field of nature conservation. The work I'm going to talk about today relates to large organizations. And I think it's really important to remember that large organizations are a big part of the problem we have to solve to achieve the green transition, right? By large organizations, I include universities, but I also mean large businesses. I mean other types of large organization. And, some of the biggest polluters when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, some of the biggest consumers of resources, and certainly some of the vehicles for engaging as many people as possible are large organizations. And so that's why I'm going to talk about that as my focus today for my few minutes on the floor. The work we've been recently doing at the University of Oxford has been all about trying to understand how the University of Oxford, as a large organization, can manage and can understand and manage its biodiversity impacts. So really, I'm going to focus on biodiversity here. But we have also looked at greenhouse gas emissions too. And what we've done through University of Oxford is said, you have this enormous organization with a highly diverse set of activities, laboratories, fieldwork, expeditions, and education, crucially, as we've been talking about. What are the biodiversity impacts of an organization like the University of Oxford? And we've taken a candid look at that and then tried to use that evaluation of the impacts that an organization like that has and say, how do we then take a practical roadmap towards reducing those impacts and getting towards a state where we meet a target of going beyond net zero for carbon and then going towards net gain for biodiversity. So that's part of the whole idea around nature positive. How does an organization achieve a nature positive outcome? And it's not only how do you do that from the point of view of the organization as a large functioning group of activities, but also as a group of people. So we've also been working with students at the University of Oxford to try and understand how they would implement these ideas that we've come across. So this is kind of the work we've been doing. We're disclosing the work publicly. We're publishing it as research. We're disclosing publicly the impacts that the University of Oxford has. And one of the key things you find is that it's really hard, right? And I don't mean to say that in a negative, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but it's very, very hard for large organizations to go from where we are now towards where we need to be, which is where they're vastly reducing their emissions, vastly reducing their impacts upon nature, and getting towards a stage where we're transitioning towards those organizations being positive, having positive impact. It's really difficult, but it's not impossible. And crucially, it's not impossible. And so what we're trying to do is show the ways in which that can happen. The University of Oxford is a really good example of this, but what can be done at the University of Oxford can be done anywhere else, right? Like any other university and really any other large organization. And so what we're trying to do now is say, well, we'll share the results of our work. We'll publish those openly and freely. We'll share the protocols that we're developing, and we'll work and collaborate with as many other groups as possible to try and implement these kind of approaches where we can practically go from where we are now towards a more green, sustainable way of operating. We work with private sector organizations increasingly, and I think it's interesting how many large companies and how many large businesses are moving towards genuine desire to actually act more sustainably. You know, I started my own university undergraduate degree 20 years ago now, and I was part of environmental movement within the university then, and it was an incredibly different climate, right, from the point of view of trying to have these discussions around the environmental impacts and how to reduce them for large organizations. And many businesses were not even remotely interested. And the difference between then and now, 20 years later, is huge. So I think we're at a really important moment where there's a lot of enthusiasm and momentum around this green transition from the point of view of organizations, including large businesses, obviously including in the political sphere too. And I think we need to seize that opportunity. And so the kind of approaches that we're keen on taking are working as much as possible with other organizations, other groups, fora like these, and moving towards the sustainable transition that way. I just want to finish my brief session, my brief few minutes by kind of really saying how universities are leaders in this space. What is it universities particularly can do? And I think we've touched upon the importance of education, and Anna talked about it very eloquently. We've talked about the importance of research that universities can provide. Universities can provide the tools needed for the green transition, which I think is really important. But I think also it's important to see universities as what they are, which is this incredibly unique nexus between different groups of people, right? They're a nexus between scientists, on the one hand, like myself, operational people, people who don't really maybe even know that much about green issues and aren't that bothered about it, but are operational. And thirdly, young people. And having a nexus between those three groups, particularly at the moment when youth movements are so influential on this overall consciousness around environmental issues, makes universities really unique and important places for the green transition. So I'll stop there, otherwise I'll talk forever. But thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Joseph, for sharing with us a lot of interesting remarks on the role of universities. And as you mentioned, you talk about the diversity of the different stakeholders in a university, and you mentioned at the end the role of youth. Based on that, I would love to introduce Samsam Ibrahim, who is the VP of the European Students' Union. So, Samsam, all yours.
Thank you so much, and it's an absolute pleasure to join you all today and follow up on the two speakers that that I wholeheartedly agree with and echo what they say. But I think a little early on there was something that was said that kind of triggered me a little bit, and I wanna go back on that in the sense of and to me, education is fundamental in achieving climate justice. And let me explain to you why that is. Over 3% of people in the world go to university, 3%. But over 80% of leaders have been to university. So let's not pretend like universities and higher education institutes aren't in the business of making future leaders, aren't in the business of creating future thinkers. Okay, so essentially to me, higher education institutions are fundamental in changing mindsets. At the end of the day, our institutions currently are creating leaders and thinkers and thought thinkers that are quite literally inequipped to deal with the issues of the world, right? They're quite literally in a situation in where they don't necessarily realize, and this is not me absolving responsibility, but not knowing the decisions, the impact your decisions have on our globe as a whole. And I think that is really dangerous. And I think the reality is when our institutions, our higher education institutions, who are quite literally built to change the way in which we move forward. Because one of the things that was said earlier, and often people like to highlight, is that yes, in 30 years' time, our the jobs that exist won't exist, and there'll be new jobs. But that was the case 30 years ago, 60 years ago. Life moves on, things change, right? We don't move from one city to another city in the same way that we did 100 years ago. But actually, the interesting thing is we do educate in this exact same way we did 100 years ago. So fundamentally, actually, our education system is ancient, right? It hasn't been upgraded, it hasn't been changed, it hasn't been developed. And so when you are in a system that was fundamentally set up for one thing, and now everything around it has changed, and it's supposed to be the system that creates future thinkers, that system is fundamentally broken. And so to me, when you want to tackle climate justice, when you want to tackle any forms of discrimination in our society, you have to start with the roots. You have to start with the institution, with the system itself. And education is at the very, very heart of that. And so for me, I think when we think about individuals, and often, like a lot of what was said today, and my concern is that we often individualize the issue of tackling climate justice, right? This isn't an individual issue. This is a systemic issue. This is a institutional issues. And actually, we can't talk about the role that Zamzam will play in essentially leading towards a green transition. Because I am, yes, a voice, but there are individuals who are in positions of power that we need to understand, that need to be lobbied, right? So often when we're told to speak up, when we're told to speak up and raise our voices in these issues, in these matters, actually the reality is it's being said by individuals who are already in those positions of power to make those changes, right? And I think, to me, it's the gaslighting and the and almost sort of the belittling of youth activists. One of the most fundamental things that we saw over the last couple of years, just before COVID, was the rise of youth strikers taking to the streets, right? And those youth strikers went to the streets not because not for the fun of it, not because they wanted to skip a class. They went to the streets every Friday at the end of each month and organized incredibly well. For one fundamental reason, and they had a very clear and simple ask, right? They self-educated themselves on the impacts of the globe, right? And they then had very clear demands of their governments of what they would like to see in the education system. Specifically in the UK, young climate strikers came together and drafted the first ever bill drafted by young people, Teach the Future. And that bill itself had very clear demands. There was a clear demand to ensure that teachers are trained to be able to teach them about climate justice. There was a bill, in the bill they included a climate endowment fund for young people to be able to organise and for there to be political education for people that don't have access to it. Those young people understood the fundamental root of political education. And when I talk about education, because I have been in the education sector for several years now, when I talk about education, to me, education extends outside the classroom, and I think that's really fundamental and important to understand. But even as Joe was talking, I remember being involved in like Oxford University, where student activists campaigned for years upon years upon years upon years, and it was only in April 2020 that the university finally decided to divest. And I think and right now in the UK we're at tipping point, right? Over 50% of universities have either divested or are committing to divest from fossil fuels. And I think that's really important, because actually when institutions like Oxford and Cambridge actually make that plunge, then you have the tipping point of where it tips over other institutions. But I think it was activists putting pressure, right? The reason that we are more comfortable to talk about climate justice, the reason we're about to talk more comfortable to talk about climate transition is because of activists consistently putting pressure, right? And so actually when there are lines that are thrown out that aggravate me, in the sense of like there's no point of striking, or there's no point of being an activist instead of an actor. Activists are actors, right? Striking is a form of action. It's a form of direct action. And it's because of people who have striked before us and are continuing to strike that things are changing, that people are being made uncomfortable and being put in positions where they're having to enact change. Because the reality is, when we're uncomfortable, you do something about it. And when we're comfortable, nothing happens and nothing changes. So I think we need to continue as young people to be disruptive, right? We need to continue to be, to organize and educate ourselves, and also actually make our spaces, but also I think never lose your agency and your power as young people. I think we play a pivotal role, and I always say, as young people, we are probably at a space where we are incredibly educated, but also have the least to lose, in that sense of, like, especially when we're at universities. And so I think it's incredibly important that we understand that we make clear demands that don't essentially that we make clear demands of our local governments, we make demands of our national governments, we organize internationally with activists all around the globe, because this isn't a problem that can be solved here currently for me in London, where I am. This is a systemic issue that will require me to work with people from the other side of the world. And I think as young activists, especially youth leaders are in this space right now, who hold positions of power, who are in rooms with people of influence, understanding that actually you're not an ally in this movement, you're actually a fundamental part of it. This is your future we're talking about. And actually taking the reins and understanding that when people...
Sorry, Samsam, if you can sum it up so we can move to the Q&A, that would be great. Sorry.
I guess I would summate by saying, when you're in a space and with people in positions of power and yourselves, I think it's important to have very clear demands of what you would like to see and how you'd like to see it, and don't compromise for anything, because at the end of the day, this is our planet you're fighting for.
Thank you, Samsam. And based on the last comments that you made, I would like to ask the three of you if you could share in less than 1 minute. We're talking about universities, but also universities and formal education as a starting point to go outside of these large organizations and infrastructures. What is the number one thing that G20 could do on this agenda? Thinking from your perspective as scientists, students, teachers, universities. Anna, would you like to go first?
Yep, I'll be real quick. I think open your eyes to the students, mainly open your eyes to what's being done, because if you close your eyes, you're going to allow things that are doing in the same way as always, as Zamzam perfectly explained to us. And to the G20, I think is listen to students. I think stop doing as is convenient to you and listen to students. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Joseph, Samsam, who wants to go now?
I don't want to follow Zamzam, so I'll go next if that's okay. Yeah, there's a huge amount I could say, but we're low on time. I think I'd build on what Anna said, and so it's not just about listening to students. I think it's about amplifying students. I really appreciated all the words that Zamzam shared about activism and the role of youth, particularly youth activism, in making sure these issues are heard and that people are sufficiently uncomfortable that they take action. And I think what the G20 can do is help amplify those voices. And I think people listen. You know, I tend to work, most of my work is about how can we work with large organizations to actually realize these changes that we want in the world. That's what I do. And those organizations listen to groups like the G20. They listen to political statements. They listen to youth activism, and they actually make changes as a result. And that's why we've seen the change we have in some respects. So I would say that what the G20 can do is they can make clear statements that amplify the concerns of youth and youth activists, but also legitimize them to the extent that they can be put into some kind of framework that then all these other organizations can put into practice. So that's what I would say.
Samsam, want to go?
Yes, I mean, for me, I think two messages. I think for what I'd like to see from G20 is investment. Put your money where your mouth is, in the sense of, like, there are there are incredible work happening and it needs to be invested in. So I think higher education institutions need to be enabled to do this work and need to be empowered to do this work. And often that empowerment comes in funding form. And so I'd like to see institutions and countries really put their money where their mouth is. But also as the young people in this room, I would like to ask you to make people uncomfortable, call out these real truths in these spaces that you're going to have in the upcoming weeks, in the upcoming months, and really use your voice in a way that creates real change, real systemic change.
Thank you. I want to thank the three of you for sharing your knowledge, a little bit at least of your knowledge and expertise, from bringing a new perspective to the topic. And thank you everyone in the audience. I hope you enjoyed the first session. I will pass the floor now to Jacopo.
Thank you so much. And with this, we concluded the session on formal education. We have talked about how the different aspects and steps in the formal educational path have an incredible potential in building the skills and knowledge and expertise needed to find sustainable solutions. We're now going towards the next session that will explore the role of a different kind of education that is nevertheless equally important, non-formal education. I will now give the floor to Sam, who will better introduce you to the topic. Sam, you have the floor.
Jacopo, and thank you everyone who's listening and watching this right now. And I really enjoyed that last session. So thanks to Anna, Joseph, and Zamzam. So I think, as the Minister has said and as Inga has said, to win the hearts and minds of young people, we cannot rely on the classroom and the lecture halls alone. To win this battle, to keep the planet under a 1.5 degree ceiling, we need to go where people spend their time. And that's places like gaming, that's places like sport. And that's also places like the youth movement's been supported by the Scouts to get young people out into nature. So today we're going to hear from 4 brilliant thinkers who've got some tremendous ideas. And I know them quite well, so I can vouch them in advance to hear what they are doing and thinking on this agenda. So let me roll out a virtual green carpet on this Zoom call, or WebEx call, forgive me, and introduce the panel to you. So first up, we have Grecia Barchena from Mexico, who is one of the World Scout Movement's global youth reps. She's awesome, and she leads their environmental advocacy program. She is on their steering committee for the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and she's been on the Scout board in Mexico for, I think, 21 years. So, and in addition to that, she also has a job, and she runs a very successful sustainable tourism company. So welcome, Grecia.
Thank you, Sam.
Pleasure. Then I'm going to introduce somebody who has a piece of metal that I'm very envious of, is Chris Mazda. So Chris is joining us at some, God knows what time it is, from the US. So he is an Olympic medalist and the first ever sustainability ambassador for the Olympics. Chris is kind of insane. He does this sport of luge, which is basically a tray, which he started at the age of 8. And after 21 years of hard work, sacrifice and setback, was the first US man to ever win an Olympic medal in this discipline. Chris is also ready to compete at Beijing next year, which I'm sure we'll hear about, and is one of the fastest luge athletes in the world. And so I think what Chris also does is away from the ice, he's a mentor for the international nonprofit Classroom Champions and is a mentor for Right to Play. And Chris is a new dad, so I think he may be multitasking in the background, but welcome, Chris. It's great to have you.
Hopefully the baby stays asleep.
Oh, great, thanks.
Thank you.
No problem. Also, we have from the world of sport to the world of gaming. So next, I want to introduce Jane Campbell, who's a studio operations lead for Us2 Games in the UK. Us2, I think, have a special place in my heart. They've got a brilliant game called Alba, which you may or may not know already. It won an Apple Design Award, which I'm sure we'll hear about from Jane. And in that game, they're taking real-world action. Already, they've planted 500,000 trees by inspiring their community to act. And Jane leans on all the sustainability and impact work at Us2, and she's got some cracking ideas. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you so much. Hello.
Great. And on the other side of the planet, we have Lee Wan, who is the global comms lead for Timi Studio Group, which is the biggest gaming studio in China and part of the Tencent network. And Lee oversees all of the work for the Playing for the Planet Alliance, which we work on here at UNEP as well. And Timmy, you've got a commitment to take this message of the environment out to 110 million gamers through games such as Honor of Kings and Pokemon. They've just launched a Green Game Jam for youth. And Lee's going to be sharing ideas about what they're doing to reach well in excess of the 2.7 billion gamers that are out there in the world. So thank you, panel, for joining us. We'll shut up soon, don't worry. So without further ado, I think I'm going to hand over to Gracia just to share her ideas about what she thinks the G20 could be doing on the non-formal education agenda. So Gracia, I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Sam. G20 can take action recognizing the non-formal education as an integral part of the right to education, as a key model to enhance personal development and to promote collective values our society needs. I think it's a good way to include it into the national education and youth policies with the financial investment. Non-formal education organizations are often non-profits and volunteer-led, and our impact on young people can be so much greater with financial and political backing. I think also non-formal education allows us to improve the range of skills and competencies that will prepare people, especially the youth people, for the real world, with different job skills such as teamwork, tolerance, determination, resilience, and even some green skills, if we can tell them like that way, such as how to take care of the environment. Ultimately, all these like processing on developing different competences will empower them to be global active citizens and be aware of their community issues and then be oriented to action to try to solve them. I also believe non-formal education really helps us to enhance inclusion because this is a life learning process, and this learning system is delivered through different means, allowing that different ways of learning are very flourish, and that we can respect, that it helps you to respect different paradigms, including gender, ethnicity, religion, language, and culture, because we all learn in a different way and we understand the world in a different way. So it really help us to learn how to go with it and really try to understand each other and learn from each other. And this is actually what we do in the Scout movement. We contribute to the education of young people through a value system and through a learning by doing methodology, which help us to kind of reach to that point where everyone can learn in different ways, and it's okay. And of course, we always do that surrounded by nature, which I consider is our laboratory of experiences, because we are always like surrounded in the woods, in the outdoors, and this has always allowed us to learn in a very different way. I have had the opportunity to be a scout since I was 6 years old, a very long time ago, and I've been a witness on how through different experiences, people can really understand better nature, right? Like people can really connect with nature and understand how it connects, the interconnection it has, and how how important is interconnectivity it provides the Mother Earth. And I think this can be done through a very easy way, for example, through observation, right? Whenever you take the time to just sit down there and see how the elements of the ecosystem react to other elements, we are learning. And these kind of things, as the ministry was telling, we cannot learn in the classroom. It has to be outside and being experienced by our own self. So if you really ask me what the G20 can take action on, I would say on designating extra time from school so you can learn in the outside in a more practical and fun way and more experiential way, and also investing financially in non-formal education as a complement to the education kids and youth get in schools. So thank you so much.
Gracia, thank you. I saw Tommaso making notes as you were speaking, so we'll be looking at that for the G20 communique, I'm sure. I now wanted to just hear from Chris. So Chris spoke to UNEP, I think it was about 6 months ago, and I think your message about overcoming fear and doing truly remarkable things sticks with me. And I'm really looking forward to giving you the floor to hear how you think sport can make and take a stand for sustainability. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so I do this little sport called luge, which is, I like to think of it as ultimate sledding. I got involved as a kid because I grew up in the mountains of northern New York, where it used to snow from October through April. And so the sledding season was 6-7 months long. And after seeing a movie called Cool Runnings, which is a bobsled movie, it really kind of, it empowered me to want to try the sport, since I grew up next to only 1 or 2 tracks in the entire country. And I just fell in love with this sport. Here I am going down this sheet of ice at 8 years old, I'm only going like 50, 60 kilometers an hour. Now we can go 140, but it was so much fun. And because I lived in a place where winter was almost half the year, if I didn't find something that really piqued my interest in the winter, I was going to struggle. And so that's kind of how winter sport kind of developed for me. And it's crazy to think, but here I am 25 years later, and that's 25 winters that I've been through and experienced. And as an athlete, I've really noticed how winters have totally changed. And in a sport that's vulnerable to conditions that are changing, the ice that we slide on changes depending on temperature. I remember when I was a kid, there used to be a cutoff at -25 Celsius that you can't race at. That never happens anymore, but it used to. And at the last World Cup this year in St. Moritz, the track was basically melting in February, which was something that we really haven't experienced before. And so that's something that I've noticed, is this transition of winter, of our playing field, of the fact that as an athlete, we need to protect our playing field. Here in Utah, just earlier in June, we hit 42 degrees Celsius. There's not a whole lot that you can do at 42 degrees Celsius, regardless of what you're doing, how much shade, how much wind. So sport is something that's coming under attack from climate change. It has to have a really unique platform to address this and a way to kind of enhance their voice. For instance, Cristiano Ronaldo, just a couple weeks ago at a press conference, pushed 2 Coca-Cola bottles away and said agua. And Coca-Cola shares dropped by almost $1, which is $4 billion in market share, which is crazy to think that an athlete with the platform can do that much to Coca-Cola. So it's incredible what athletes have, and we have to realize that for whatever reason, people don't always trust the experts. They don't trust politicians. They don't even trust their own governments. But athletes, we're somebody that people will listen to. And that's something that's growing, and it's incredible seeing that change. So when sport takes the lead and people use their platforms, it's incredible how this non-formal education works. So being a role model is something that's really important for athletes to become. And we're starting to see that. So talking about this non-formal education, introducing sustainability at the highest levels of sport will trickle down. Athletes will be role models, use their platforms, and we're starting to see it. And it has real implications for Coca-Cola when Cristiano Ronaldo does something like that. So yeah, sport's an amazing thing, and we're going to continue to push hard to make changes that way in the world. Thanks, Sam.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris. I think that the power of sport, just looking at my kids and what the England football team doing when they win a game, which is quite rare, particularly against Germany, it is extraordinary. And I think sport has huge power, but also huge responsibility, because the playing field it relies on will not be there in the way that we are used to it being there unless we act fast. So, Chris, thanks for that brilliant message. So we're going to go from sports on mountainsides to sports on screens. And I wanted to bring Jane into this discussion now from us two, who I introduced earlier, and just to hear about the work that you're doing to bring impact for the environment into your game. So Jane, I'm going to hand to you, and then Lee Wan will come straight off the back of you with his thoughts from Timmy. So, Jane, the floor and the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm going to change it up and share a couple of slides with you guys. Games people always share slides. Right. Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. And hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Jane from Us2 Games. I'm the operations lead, and I help drive our environmental and sustainability initiatives at the studio. We're a small games company. We're based in London in the UK. We're around 30 people, and we're a group of individuals who are passionate about using our platform as game creators to make a positive impact in the world. So here are some of our best known titles. I'll give you a quick run through. We've got the mobile game series, Monument Valley and Monument Valley 2. After we created those games, we explored some VR with Land's End. And then more recently, we've expanded to reach new audiences through PC and console platforms with our game Assemble with Care. And then most recently, the game that Sam touched on, which is Albert, a wildlife adventure. We're really proud to make games that are unique, handcrafted experiences, using our platform and our media to tell meaningful, relatable stories that inspire and delight our players. With games now being the single biggest entertainment medium on the planet, we think there is a unique opportunity and unrivaled power to engage and captivate an audience and impart powerful messaging through the storytelling medium of games. So what can the games sector do for the environment agenda? The games industry sector has the potential to make a significant impact on how climate change is perceived by the global youth game playing community. One of the most influential ways the game industry can positively affect the environment agenda is through inspiring billions of people around the world to take action. By using video games as a platform to communicate important messages, we can help change the hearts and minds of the younger generations and continue to talk about these important topics. With over 2.5 billion people now regularly playing video games, the opportunity for game businesses to inspire a huge audience to consider the environment agenda has never been greater. The sector's doing a lot already. Games companies are already uniting globally to tackle the climate crisis through initiatives like the Playing for the Planet Alliance. Us2 Games are members of the Alliance, and we and the other companies involved have each made voluntary, ambitious commitments to address some of the world's biggest environmental challenges. Each set of commitments are unique, assessing the impact that each company can make through addressing their carbon emissions and also through integrating environmental content within their games. As part of the Playing for the Planet Alliance, we're also one of 30 game companies who are participating in the 2021 Global Green Game Jam, a project that unites video game studios around the world in a commitment to implement green activations within live popular games. So games that already have existing reach and an existing wide player base that are active in the game. Our contribution as Us2 Games was the commitment to bring brand new content to our popular title Monument Valley 2, which will explore the themes of forest conservation through gameplay. So I'd like to use our example of Albert, a wildlife adventure as an example to demonstrate how games can play a role in the environment agenda. At Us2 Games, many of our projects stems from ideas and themes that we're deeply passionate about as a group of people. And in December 2021, we released the game Albert, a Wildlife Adventure, which is about spending time amongst nature as a child and having that can-do attitude to recognise that you have the power to make a difference. So in the game, Alba, who is an avid nature lover and adventurer, she visits her grandparents at their home on a Mediterranean island. The experience is idyllic and it's really reminiscent of childhood holidays until the point that she recognises that there's a threat to her beloved wildlife on the island. So Alba and her friend decide to take on the threat of the corporation that's responsible for the destruction, and with the support of the island community, they're able to protect the nature reserve and save the wildlife. Making a game about nature meant that, to us, it was impossible to ignore the opportunity to talk about sustainability and nature conservation. It's a core theme of Alba, and what we have learned in the time since we launched the game is that these themes have really resonated with our audience, and particularly with our youngest players. Alba has helped start the conversation about protecting wildlife between parent and child, and we hear from parents that children who have played the game are asking to spend more time engaging with nature, just like Alba. So we were able to communicate an inspiring story around environmentalism within the game, but we really wanted to make sure that we continue to create impact outside of the game's ecosystem as well, and we wanted to help people to connect with what inspired them about Alba with action in the real world. So through through this intention, we ended up with probably our most impactful and ambitious call to action, which was the promise that we would plant 1 tree for every copy of the game downloaded and sold. And through our partner tree planting platform Ecology, we are planting trees and projects focused on restoration of habitats and biodiversity around the world. So our target is 1 million trees, and we're so thrilled to already be 3/4 of the way to our goal with over 730,000 trees planted. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jane.
Stop sharing screen.
Super. Leah, I'm going to hand the floor to you now to tell us what Timmy Group's doing on this agenda. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm also from the games industry, and we are a content business. So I would also like to share some graphics and visual aids in while I'm talking. So we are a Timmy Studio Group. We are a proud member of the Playing for the Planet Alliance, and we are the first game development studio from China to join the alliance. We are the developer of Call of Duty Mobile, Honor of Kings, Arena of Valor, and the upcoming Pokemon Unite. So if you are a player of Timmy Games, you can let us know in the group chat. And Timmy is one of the biggest game developer in the world by player count. I'll use very specific examples to echo James' points. With our example of Honor of Kings, which is the first game in the world to average 100 million daily active users. So China is a huge games market. It's the biggest games market in the world. According to our calculation, every 1 in 8 people, 1 in 8 video game players in the world are in China. So and that is the data from the end of 2020, and we believe the number is still growing as we speak. Next slide, please. So speaking of scale, here is one example. We leverage one of our biggest titles, which is called Honor of Kings, to do a green activation in our games. This year, we featured 4 playable heroes, specially designed skins representing the wind, the rain, the thunder, and the snow in the game to explore with the community together to explore the relationship between the nature and the humans. Next slide, please. In a dedicated trailer, we feature heroes combating the dark force, which is a representation of the natural challenges. Next slide, please. In addition, we also invited top meteorological scientists to guide our players, player community with a useful link, with some useful knowledge regarding the climate and the disaster early response, something like that. So next slide. What is a game? In my view, games are now a highly accessible and a form of highly interactive media. So we are not only working on our own. Instead, we are partnering with a wide range of industries as an enabler of other organizations and brands to contribute to the collective sustainable agenda. And these partners include NGOs, commercial brands, documentary, traditional media, and so on. So if anyone here is interested in leveraging games to educate about the environment, please let me know. So out recent example is our partnership with a documentary. It's a 3-episode 4K high fidelity documentary, which is called China Nature's Ancient Kingdom. And it was broadcast on China Central Television, China's biggest television network. And the campaign allows players to overcome challenges to save 4 kinds of wildlife in the forest, namely the giant panda, Yunnan golden monkey, and the snow leopard, and the Siberian tiger. Next slide, please. Yeah, here you can see the animals. And in the next slide, helps switch the mastery. So the parts will eliminate violence. 10 years on the screen of the mobile phone, while the documentary was broad screen of V. So, and we spend zero in marketing because it's embedded in one of our live existing titles. So we are helping the traditional media to reach an audience they usually don't have access to. And here, the opportunity created through partnership
Lee, your connection's a little bit choppy, sir. Can you hear me? Lee, I'm gonna say you're cutting in and out quite heavily. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear. So where were we?
I think you were just talking about the Green Game Jam. What I might do, I've just got one eye on the time, and I just want to be respectful to the next session. Do you just mind just wrapping up in say 30 seconds, just summarizing your slides? And I just want to do a quick work round on the panel on one question.
No problem. So with the Green Game Jam for Youth, we are encouraging the university students to propose their ideas and to win up to 10,000 USD as prize. So we think in this way, we are going to help the next generation game developers to build this sustainable awareness, because they are the people who can decide what players worldwide can play in a few years. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. That's great. Thanks for that presentation. Thank you to Jane as well. So I just wanted to, we could talk about this for hours if we had hours, but we don't. We have minutes. And so I just want to put each of you on the spot, if that's okay. And just Chris, you talked about the Ronaldo example. And I just wondered, just from your experience and your work with the Olympics, do you think sport's doing enough on sustainability, and what more do you think it could be doing that it's not yet doing?
So the answer is sport is getting there. I think sport has recognized the role that it does play in just being role models for the rest of the world. So the IOC is setting sustainability goals. That's trickling into international federations, which then goes down to national federations, and then grassroots programs. So it is beginning, and there's a huge focus on this. But I think one of the biggest factors is protecting the playing field and understanding that you're right, sport is changing because of our climate. So we are going to we are going to have to shift, but right now it's a little bit slow. But I think at least when I'm talking to the IOC, international federations, national federations, sustainability is a very big topic, and sports have been running for some of sports hundreds of years. So the tradition is going to have to take a huge mind shift change. For instance, luge, we start at the end of September. Why? TV. But that's not really, September is not a good luge month. So we're looking on changing how we can structure our schedule to be more efficient and sustainable. So it's things like this that are now coming to the front. And yeah, that platform that athletes have is huge. So thank you so much for having me, Sam.
Pleasure. You're always welcome, Chris. Now, just Jane, a question for you. Just knowing the fierce competition for the video gaming industry to be based inside your city, is there a way that governments could incentivize the gaming industry to not just create amazing games that inspire, but making games that have a bit more purpose? And do you have any ideas, again, sorry, in 1 minute, about what kind of incentive could be placed around that for gaming companies to do more good from governance?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so gaming communities and studios exist all over, but you're right, there's definitely different opportunities available to gaming companies based on their location. I can talk authentically about the UK game industry, and you know, it's great that you actually don't have to be based in London in order to be able to access the substantial support network. There are lots of other benefits. So, for example, here in the UK, we have an incredible trade association, UKI, who are influential in making the UK a top destination for games and interactive entertainment businesses to thrive. Alongside UKI support, government in the UK incentivises game companies to create through the offer of game tax relief, which is an R&D tax allowance that helps companies to be ambitious and I guess to also explore more creative ideas or outcomes with the games that they make that may otherwise have been too risky to consider. And I think this is probably where the potential for further opportunities or further collaboration with government lies. Governments could partner more with local game sectors, you know, and pose the question, how can games help in the environment agenda? The game sector is already heavily pro-green, and governments could see the sector as an ally in using the reach and creativity of the industry to take environmental messages out to the masses. Another opportunity could be to offer these taxation incentives to tempt the industry to create for pro-green outcomes in the games that they make. We've seen our sector already to be hugely passionate about taking a stand against climate change, and with more support, governments could utilise this passion as a sector and the incredible reach of games as an entertainment medium to achieve even more on this agenda.
Thanks, Jane. Extra points for being in a minute as well. I just think I was a scout, Gracia, and I love what you said. And the scouts come from the trees. But yet on every single biodiversity metric, we're losing nature faster than ever. So given the scouts spend time in the trees, come from the trees, what support do you need from government to help the youth and scout movements do what needs to be done for nature?
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you for having me as well. As I mentioned, I think it would be important on designating extra time from school, so you can learn outside and they can learn in the woods in a more practical and fun way, in a more unstructured but planned way, where they can really kind of through hands-on experience things, share things, and build a common, like a common knowledge where they can exchange ideas and try them on the ground. And I will also say that the financial investment on non-formal education, like youth-led, volunteer-led, or non-profit organization is really important. So we can keep reaching that amount of people and can keep giving the type of program we do. Also, perhaps would be a good idea to stretch the links between formal and non-formal education in order to create policies that holistically meet the educational needs of young people. Because as it has been mentioned in the other panels and our panel as well, the type of education we needs to like keep progressing, and it will be evolving. So we need to be ready to provide the correct program and information that the youth need to face the real world. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Gracia.
Thank
so
you.
Lee, we even have less time now. So I just know that the gaming industry is probably one of the most creative sectors on the planet. How could it really kind of step up and support the environmental education challenge that we have? And if you could just keep it maybe even to 30 seconds, that would be great, because I want to respect the next panel.
Yeah, I think it's related to the nature of the games. The nature of the game, I want to share 2 points. The first is that it's a form of content, a form of media, or we say it's a form of art. So it conveys messages, ideas, meanings. So in games, we can leverage our content to educate people. And the second point is that games is a space, it's a digital space where people gather together and interact together. Probably in the future, we envision that some big games, some virtual communities will host a large percentage of the world's population. So as we are talking about education today, my advice is that we should educate where the audiences will be.
Thanks, Lee. So I don't know about you, but I found this fascinating because I think we often think about what we can do through very formal education channels, but there are so many other routes to get to young people's hearts and minds. And on behalf of everyone that's listening, I just wanted to give a big virtual round of applause to the panelists for giving us your wisdom and your expertise. So thank you for joining us. And Jacopo, I know you're knocking on my door and need the room, so I'm going to hand over the floor to you. And thanks so much everyone for joining the panel, and let's talk about green jobs and Jacopo.
Thank you. We talked about the role of formal and non-formal education, but we're now getting towards the last session, probably the most important. We will now in fact address how we can build capacities to make sure that the future workforce is well equipped with the right skills, expertise, and knowledge to really tackle novel challenges in relation to sustainability. Mary will be the moderator for this session and will guide you through the many different aspects of this topic. Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Jacopo. Welcome everyone to the third and the last session of the event. My name is Maria Shimura. I work for UNEP. Now, we're going to hear from our prominent speakers discuss capacity building, as Jacopo said. We have Mr. Enrico Botta, the Green Growth Coordinator at OECD, Mr. Marco Piccolo Rinaldi, President of a Business Association in Italy. And finally, we have Simon Hazel, entrepreneur from South Africa, tackling food waste through insect protein. The global population is increasing and we're facing the largest youth population in history. However, 68 million youth are struggling to find a job today, a situation only exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, working hours equivalent to more than 250 million full-time jobs were lost. And young people, particularly women, are the hardest hit by both climate change and the pandemic. The good news is that the transition to green economy is estimated to add up to 60 million new jobs to the market by 2030. And there are studies indicating that most students are willing to accept a salary sacrifice to work in a company with a good environment and social record. And it also says that 57% of youth would prefer to work for an environmentally sustainable business. The question is, what are the skills, knowledge, and opportunities that future and current workforce need to meet the new demands in green and circular economy? So let's hear from our first speaker, Mr. Enrico Botta. Enrico, is everyone's camera on, actually, the speakers, hopefully. Enrico is the Green Growth Coordinator at OECD, and he works on the design of environmental policies, their impacts and social implications. His most recent research focuses on the challenges and opportunities of a just local carbon transition, low carbon transition, including what it means for the job market, workers, and skills needs. He's going to tell us how youth can contribute to the design of environmental policies and their impacts and why it's important. Enrico, thanks for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Mari, and thanks a lot for organizing this very interesting event and debate. So let me start with the end of your question, the why the youth needs to be involved in the design of environmental policies, especially at this moment of history. Young people are the ones that will suffer the most the consequences of unsustainable development and climate change. Basically, they will inherit a large ecological debt if we cannot ensure the society moves to a more sustainable growth trajectory. At the same time, they may also be burdened by a large economic debt. The recovery packages that countries are drafting and starting to implement are considerable. It's a considerable amount of money. If this funding is not well spent, then it will add to the existing debts of countries and will be an additional burden on the shoulder of the new generation. So this is why it's really important that the youth is involved, because their interests are at stake in several manners. Now the question is how we can ensure their involvement. And the idea is that, generally speaking, all age groups should be involved in all the steps of the policy-making process, from design to its impact assessment. And a number of mechanisms can be put in place to design. Just to name a few, you can have public consultations, which are usually launched in the design phase of new policies, and they should reach all different age groups. And to design, you can use different communication channels. In the panel before, we discussed also about video games as an important communication channel with the youth. Programs need to be in place to ensure that young people are represented in the public sector workforce. An additional tool is, for instance, making sure that national statistics are geared towards this objective of involving all different age groups. So to design, you might collect age disaggregated data. Now, beyond the mechanism needed to allow the youth to participate, we need also to make sure that they have the right skills. There's a lot of talking about the post-truth. Can you still hear me?
Enrico, can you hear us, or can you speak? We can see you now.
Okay, that's great. So I was saying, beyond the mechanism needs to be in place to allow the youth to participate in the policy-making process, we need also to make sure that they have the right skills. There is a lot of talking about the so-called post-truth era and the threat that fake news create to democracies. But there's also a threat to climate action, as climate policy is rooted in science. We act because science tells us the risk of inaction. If you don't believe in science, if you don't understand science, then you don't understand the need to act. So in this context, it's very important that schools equip students with the skills required to distinguish claims based on scientific evidence from those based on opinion. And that's also something that the next OECD PISA survey is going to analyze in school, and how schools keep students on this topic. And a second point is, of course, to ensure that young people are equipped with the skills to profit from opportunities of the green low carbon transition. And to design is crucial that education curriculum provide up-to-date skills for the emerging green careers, and that there is raising awareness of people about the opportunities that are there. And in this context, a strong link between academia and industry is also extremely important. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Enrico. It's truly importance of thank you for sharing the importance of involving youth in policy design, and it's really good to hear your actual, coming from your actual work today. Next up, please welcome Mr. Marco Piccolo Rinaldi. Marco is an entrepreneur, an educator, and a trainer for young people. He's the president of a Confindustria Piemonte for corporate social responsibility. Confindustria is an association of manufacturing and service companies representing 150,000 member companies and over 5 million employees. He's also the CEO of Rinaldi, a third-party cosmetic manufacturing companies with a strong focus on sustainability practice and social impacts. In 2020, the company won Italy's National Award for Civil Economy, making him the National Ambassador for Civil Economy. With a huge potential of job creation in green economy, let's turn to Marco and hear how he sees the trend in green transition for industries in Italy, and what plan does he has for his association and his members to meet the new skills demand. Enrico, could you turn off your microphone, if it's off? Marco, thank you for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for joining this workshop. It is for me a great pleasure to be here with you and to discuss a highly topic issue, which is the art of a new model to grow and to doing business in Europe, the green transition. Indeed, the ecological transition will generate an unprecedented transformation in all aspects of the social economic life and a global level, a real cultural revolution. Precisely, the value of the country's sustainability is achieved through the managerial performance. And so in this context, the ruling class assume a central role and constitutes an opportunity to be exploited, not only for the benefits, but for the implication in terms of greater qualified employment, to be understood as an added value for the entire country system. In particular, it is estimated that in Italy, the number of industrial and service companies that invested in the last 5 years in products and technologies with positive implication for an environmental point of view were approximately 400,000, nearly the 32% of the total. And just for the industrial sector, we are talking about more than 142,000 companies. That is about 34% of the total. Therefore, it's clear that the ruling class in our country is acquiring a fundamental awareness of these transition processes. This now represents an opportunity that companies cannot lose, especially with a view to recovery and post-pandemic growth. In fact, it is good to point out that the green transition is leading to the birth of the new business models, for which it is essential to anticipate and foresee their needs and minimize the mismatching between skills and jobs. To develop the employment potential of green economy, we need young people like you, qualified in professional skills, required and also the possibility to updating and retraining staff who are already employed or have remaining unemployed. And according for some Italian studies, in 2019, there was approximately 1.7 million green jobs, destined in particular in professions related to the circular economy. In addition, 79% of Italian companies require green skills, not only for those who have a university degree, 83%, but also for the recent high school student, and for those entering the world of work immediately afterwards the compulsory school, 79%. So, for the future, the estimated increase of green employment amounted to 34% of the next 10 years, thanks to the confidence in investment and in European policy and objects. I conclude my point in out that Confindustria has repeatedly requested the government to prepare adequate fiscal and financial tools to support companies, especially SMEs, to seize all the opportunity of business model based on sustainability. In this context, managerial skills are essential to move the direction of sustainability. As Confindustria, we've decided to start a consultation with our entire associative system to define the real needs of the companies in this ecological transition path, which will lead us to identify the characteristics and skills that the sustainability manager must have. After, we will start a cycle of seminars for all our companies to support them on this process. So we have a lot of things to do in our country because sustainability is the future for us, okay? And also the entrepreneur needs to understand that sustainability is the future for them.
Thank you, Marco. It's great to see the positive trend in green jobs profile in Italy and your energetic message. Thank you so much. And next up, please welcome Mr. Simon Hazel. Simon is an entrepreneur, co-founder and CEO at Inseco. He co-founded Inseco, a biotechnology company that converts food waste into animal feed using insects. The company responds to the demand for sustainable and high-quality protein to feed a rapidly growing population, a huge challenge in our global food system today. The company has won numerous international awards for its sustainable waste management model, including India's Global Clean Tech Innovation Program in 2019. He currently serves on the board of numerous clean tech companies in South Africa, working across various industries. Do we have Simon here? While there are 1 billion people experiencing skills mismatch, Simon got his inspiration from the family farm and managed to use his education background to run a green business operation in a very unique way. Let's hear him talk about gaining skills that are needed to meet inspiration. Simon, the floor is yours.
Hello, Marie. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for having me here today. So, yeah, I think, when it comes to the green economy, I speak primarily now from a for-profit perspective. From my perspective, sort of looking at the work that I've done in the sector over the last couple of years, there needs to be quite a strong focus on the underlying commercials, the sort of business model within the space of green economy. So this applies to individuals looking to start a career in the green economy. This applies to policymakers, as well as new businesses and existing businesses going forward. So from my own experience running in sector, as well as from sort of sitting on the board of a few early stage green businesses, primarily in South Africa, I oftentimes see a focus on sustainability, which is good, right? It's first and foremost, but often it's the commercial understanding of the impact that a new sustainability project or technology that they're looking to bring to market gets less attention. And this was the case when I first started in Seco. We sort of had the mindset that if it's a sustainable product, everyone's caring about sustainability, they'll buy it or they'll use the service, so to speak. And I assumed that, going forward, that the commercials would sort of fall into place. And I learned very quickly that this is not, in fact, the case, especially in times of economic difficulty like we're experiencing now with COVID. Customers, and when I talk about customers, it's consumers, it's businesses, it's organizations, it's governments, they become quite price sensitive. So even though customers might care about sustainability and want to transition towards it, pricing or the sort of underlying commercial value proposition is a key factor when making that transition towards a greener or more sustainable technology or product. So a classic example is solar. A decade ago, solar was a very small percentage of the overall supply of electricity, and now we see it becoming more commercially attractive through technological advancement, and it's becoming ubiquitous across the supply chain. And this type of thinking, this commercial mindset that underpins the transition towards sustainable products and systems and technologies, it applies across the spectrum, right? The customer needs to derive a commercial benefit. Without this commercial value creation, even if there's a sustainability benefit, the technology will not scale. You won't be able to get it into the hands of millions of customers or consumers, and ultimately that limits the environmental or social impact that the product or technology can have. So as the minister said earlier, this is not easy. Technologies or products or services that are both sustainable and commercially attractive are not easy to design and develop, and they're quite few and far between. So from my perspective, to answer your question, Marie, I think the skills mismatch. So from a skills development perspective, I think one of the key things that needs to be focused on is the intersection of sustainability and commercial viability. So a good example of this is when, as you said, in 2019, my company took part in UNEP's Global Clean Tech Innovation Program. And at the time, the company was relatively new, and we participated in a sort of training program whereby after the 2-week process, we were put in front of judges who sort of subjected our business to a bit of questions, Q&A, and try to understand it. And at that point in time, I was very focused on the sustainability. And I'll never forget, one of the judges said to me, it's all good and well having a sustainable story, but you've got to have a strong commercial value proposition. And it was at that point in time, sort of through the program, that we sort of started to prioritize the commercial side of what we were doing. And it made a very big impact on the business. Now the commercials is front and center alongside the sustainability benefits. So in summary, I think if you're looking to start a green business or develop skills that make you attractive in the green economy at large, I would say that a key focus should be on the commercial value proposition of whatever it is that you're looking to do. There are obviously technical skill sets that are essential that need to develop it, but those skills need to be developed within a sort of commercial framework, because otherwise it's difficult to sort of see them grow. And the beauty of a sustainable technology or product or solution is that as it grows, it makes more impact. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Now that we don't have questions from the Q&A, I have a question for you. We heard from Marco about working with government to prepare adequate fiscal or financial tools to support companies. Now, let me turn to you, Enrico. Is the recovery package really creating green jobs? Is there a gap that needs to be addressed to the governments?
Thanks. So that's a very important question. So the OECD has been monitoring the recovery efforts of OECD member countries and key partner countries. And the data so far shows that only around 17% of recovery measures are green, and another 17% is measures that have either a negative or a mixed impacts on the environment. So far, we can say that the spending doesn't match the rhetoric we've been hearing about, the green recovery. However, the picture is changing very rapidly as countries are, deploying and preparing their recovery plans. We know the big funding coming from the European Union or the US, just to cite one or two biggest example. So the picture is changing. There is hope to see a real green recovery, but we are not there yet.
Thank you, Enrico. Marco, I know that you also have a company, Rinaldi, that you established. Looking at the opportunity for a green transition, can you share how you're integrating circular economy into practice and what skills are required for young generation to foster circular and sustainability business models?
Okay, I want to show you something strange that we made like cosmetics, but I want that my son Simone tell you. He studied economics and sustainability. He's 20 years old, and now he tell you his project. Okay, just to let you that the new generation can make a new project. Okay, Simone, tell
Thank
them.
you. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Simone Piccolo, his son, and I'm following all the sustainability part in Rinaldi because, as my father says, managers nowadays has the idea of what is sustainability, but they need new generation that has the knowledge to go deeper on that. So in 2020, we, as a Rinaldi, invest in the creation of a startup that upcycle food waste from the production of apple juice to create a raw material that is very interesting and usable in cosmetics. So we started to work on the upcycle and the utilization of food waste and create potential and very useful raw material. In addition to this, we had a high investment on the water use. So today we are able to recover and filter all the water that we use in our production to have a virtual zero impact on water usage.
And also we have zero CO2 emission. And so in the part of production, we are very sensitive in the sustainable fields. And then also the packaging, the packaging to send the cosmetics are made for Down syndrome people. So we use people with the Down syndrome to prepare the packaging and to sell cosmetics. And then we use some people also to take care about the mountains, the woods. And so in this project, we have also CO2 credits. We sell cosmetics with circular economy. We take people with the advantage that we gave them some work, okay? And then we produce CO2 credits. So you can make money, profit money, honor money, and take care about the social and the environment. This is the question. The future, the civil economy will be will give money for the company, but in the same time have to have benefits for the society and for the environment. Otherwise, there is not company, there is not industry. This is a new model, this is a new economy, and you are the future. You can choose to change the world by making new projects like this one.
Amazing, Marco. It seems like you're tackling the entire pillars of sustainable development and applying your business models holistically within the sustainability concept. Thank you so much. Now, Simon, as you know, studies shows that most young people want to work for environmental conscious company, and there are lots of energy towards that. And you mentioned the skills match is the key for development. What skills should they focus on developing when trying to make a career or start a business like you?
So I'm not a technical guy. I studied finance and economics. I think economics was a very valuable discipline that I worked on. They sort of it sort of gives you a slightly broader sense of how to approach a given problem. So yeah, I think there definitely are technical skill sets that are required. Our business that we run here, we have lots of scientists and chemists and biologists that have got lots of PhDs behind them that help with the technical side of the business. So, but those skill sets, in my opinion, are sort of applicable across a range of industries. Whereas, I think looking at, speaking from my own personal perspective, I think being able to look at a sustainability problem with a commercial mindset is particularly important. It's a mismatch that I've seen with lots of the different companies that I advise. They have brilliant founders who are highly technical, but they often lack the understanding of, the same way that a financial company needs to prioritize getting to market, for example. Those types of thought processes need to be highlighted, specifically when it comes to starting a business. Because if you don't keep that front and center, it's never going to work. So I think when developing products that are new to market, that are sustainable, for example, people need to keep front and center. Does it make commercial sense? Especially if you're selling to other businesses. If you're selling to consumers, then it can be a function of marketing. But I think, as I said earlier in my sort of talk, it's crucial that there's a commercial value proposition as well, which makes the challenge very difficult, but hence the need for skills development in those areas.
Wonderful, Simon. Thank you so much. So we heard today the importance of youth involvement in policy design, and we heard a real example of tackling sustainability holistically, and also the intersection of commercial and product viability. As UNEP CD Inger Andersen said, change from within. And thank you so much for today's speakers for sharing exactly that. And let's not forget, lastly, as Mr. Roberto Cingolani said, let's not forget gender. The integration of gender equality into economic and social policies is the fundamental requirements for sustainable development. The pay gap and access to finance, lands, and education are correlation to nations' long-term competitiveness in green economy. Thanks to all the speakers today and audience for joining today. Jacopo, over to you.
Thank you very much. We have now touched upon the importance of formal education in accelerating the ecological transition, unpacking all its different angles. We then addressed the complementary role that non-formal education can play in raising awareness and empowering youth on the sustainability challenges of tomorrow. And finally, through this last session, we highlighted how capacity building is needed to prepare future generations for the so-called green jobs. We are now getting to the conclusion of the event, but not yet. We have now a video message from Virginijus Sinkevicius, European Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. I leave now a few seconds to the technical team to set it up. Thank you.
Young people are concerned about their future. They are worried about the effects of climate change and want governments and institutions to be mobilized to act, here and now. And young people like you have the power to push for that. You can set goals, go beyond them, and change the world we live in. When I see young leaders getting involved and participating, I'm not just grateful, I'm also filled with hope. You can also help by getting actively involved in our upcoming actions and policies, because to scale up Europe's environmental agenda, we need your feedback. Here is 3 ways you can make it happen. First, get involved in consultations. Look on the European Commission website and have your say on what's coming up. Right now, for example, you can tell us what you think of our upcoming strategy for sustainable textiles. I believe you might find this very interesting, especially as it's very closely linked to sustainable consumption and production patterns and the circular economy, topics that you are passionate about. We listen and your voice can make a difference. Second, an upcoming initiative. My services often reach out to young audiences. Right now, they are working with the Global Youth Biodiversity Network to launch a train of hope. It's a virtual train, but it will travel through Europe and beyond, raising awareness about COP15, the upcoming conference on biodiversity. It gives a voice to young people fighting biodiversity loss and climate change. It will be designed for you and by you. So raise your voice and climb on board. And third, watch out for the conference on the future of Europe. It's President von der Leyen's major new forum for debate. Here is the link between citizens and the institutions and give back a sense of control. It's the biggest outreach exercise that Europe has. So make sure that and running. So find an event that's happening near you. Today's workshop is very useful, feeding directly into the G20 agenda, because we don't just need your ideas, we need you to take a leading role in the green transition. You are the ones who will inhabit this planet's future. So I'm hoping to hear more about your conclusions and your remarks. I'll make sure to deliver on your expectations when discussing with ministers of environment in Naples in the end of July.
Thank you so much. And with these inspirational words by Commissioner Sinkevičius, we have now got to the end of this event. I hope you gained a better understanding that when it comes to sustainability, youth is here to help, but the right structures need to be in place, with education in all its aspects and angles being one of the main pillars. I would like also to thank all the speakers and moderators for being with us today, and also for all participants for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and thanks for joining.